Story 1. My name is Emily, and this happened when I was about 12. I'd just become friends with Sarah, a girl who'd moved to my school mid-year. She invited me for a sleepover, and I was thrilled. Her house was bigger than mine, one of those older two-story places with lots of nooks and crannies. What I didn't know much about was her older brother, Mark. Sarah mentioned him once or twice, said he was 16 and kind of a loner. That was an understatement. When I arrived, Sarah's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, were perfectly nice, though a bit distracted. Mark was introduced briefly. He was tall and lanky, with dark hair that fell over his eyes. He didn't say, "Hello?" Just gave this tiny nod, his eyes lingering on me for a fraction of a second too long before he retreated to his room. I shrugged it off. Teenagers, right? Sarah and I had a blast for the first few hours. Movies, junk food, giggling. About boys in our class, but I started to get this weird feeling, like we weren't alone. A couple of times I'd glance in the direction of Sarah's bedroom door and catch a flicker of movement in the hallway. Once, I was sure I saw a shadow slip past the narrow gap, under the door. "Is your brother out there?" I whispered to Sarah during a quiet moment in the movie. She rolled her eyes. "Probably. He's always lurking. Don't worry, he's harmless. Just weird." Harmless. I wish I could have believed that. Later, when Sarah went to the bathroom, I was alone in her room for a few minutes. The door was slightly ajar. I heard a floorboard creak in the hall. My heart did a little flutter kick. I told myself it was just the old house settling. Then, a small, oddly shaped gray rock, smooth like a river stone, was slid under the door. It stopped right by my foot. I stared at it, my breath catching. No knock, no word. Just the rock. When Sarah came back, I showed it to her. "Oh, that's Mark," she said, picking it up and tossing it onto her desk. "He does stuff like that. Finds weird things and leaves them around. Told you he was odd." She didn't seem concerned at all, which made me feel a bit silly for being creeped out. We set up our sleeping bags on her floor. Hours later, long after Sarah was breathing deeply beside me, I woke up. I don't know why. The room was dark, only faint moonlight filtering through the curtains. I had that prickly sensation on my skin, the one that tells you you're being watched. I turned my head slowly to the door. And there he was. Mark. Standing in the doorway, a dark silhouette, against the slightly less dark hallway. He was perfectly still, just watching us. My blood ran cold. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. How long had he been there? What did he want? He didn't move a muscle. His face was obscured by shadows, but I could feel the intensity of his gaze. It felt like an eternity, but it was probably only 30 seconds before he slowly, silently, stepped back and disappeared. I lay there, rigid with fear, until the sun started to rise. I didn't sleep another wink. The next morning, I tried to act normal. Mark was at the breakfast table, staring into his cereal bowl, not speaking. Mrs. Peterson asked if I'd slept well. I mumbled a yes, avoiding Mark's gaze. As I was packing my bag to leave, Sarah was out of the room again. Mark appeared at the doorway. "Did you like the stone, Emily?" he asked, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. It was the first time he'd spoken directly to me. "It was nice," I stammered, my hand shaking as I zipped my bag. He took a step into the room. "I have others, prettier ones. I could show you. In my room." His eyes weren't boyish or shy. They were flat, intense. A cold dread washed over me. This wasn't just odd. This felt wrong, dangerous. I have to go," I said, grabbing my bag and practically bolting from the room. I made my excuses to Sarah and her parents, desperate to get out of that house. As I walked down their front path, I glanced back. Mark was standing in an upstairs window, partially hidden by the curtain, watching me leave. I never went back to Sarah's house. Our friendship faded pretty quickly after that. To this day, I can't stand the feeling of being watched, and I always check the hallways. I still don't know what Mark's intentions were, if he was just profoundly socially awkward or something more sinister. But the memory of him standing in that dark doorway His silent, unwavering gaze still makes my skin crawl. Story 2. My best friend when I was 10 was a kid named Liam. We lived for sleepovers at each other's houses. His place was particularly cool. His backyard bordered a small patch of woods, and next to that, separated by a tall, rickety wooden fence, was Mr. Henderson's property. Mr. Henderson was an old man, lived alone, and we rarely saw him. His house was a bit run down, paint peeling, yard overgrown. He was the neighborhood enigma, the subject of whispered ghost stories among us kids. One Saturday afternoon, during a sleepover at Liam's, we were playing catch in his backyard. Predictably, Liam overthrew, and the baseball sailed clear over the fence into Mr. Henderson's yard. We both froze. "You gotta get it," Liam said. "No way, you threw it," I argued, my stomach already tightening. Going into Mr. Henderson's yard felt like trespassing in a dragon's lair. After a tense game of rock, paper, scissors, which I lost, of course, I reluctantly agreed. Liam boosted me up, and I scrambled over the creaky fence, dropping into the tall, damp grass on the other side. Mr. Henderson's yard was even more desolate up close. Weeds choked everything. An old rusted wheelbarrow lay on its side. I quickly spotted the baseball near a straggly rosebush. As I bent to pick it up, I noticed his back door was slightly ajar. Curiosity, that dangerous childhood itch, got the better of me. I crept closer, heart thumping. Through the gap, I could see a sliver of his kitchen. It was dim, but a light was on further inside. I heard a sound. A low, rhythmic humming, almost like chanting, but too indistinct to make out words. Then I saw him. Mr. Henderson was visible through a grimy kitchen window, but he wasn't looking in the direction of the back door. He was facing another window, looking out at the street, his back mostly to me. He seemed to be muttering to himself, but I couldn't hear what. It was deeply unsettling. I grabbed the ball and scrambled back over the fence as fast as I could, feeling like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. That night, things got weirder. Liam and I were in his room, which overlooked his backyard and, beyond it, Mr. Henderson's property. It was late, probably past midnight. "Dude, look," Liam whispered, pointing. A light was on in Mr. Henderson's house, flickering irregularly in what we guessed was his living room. As we watched, it went out, then came back on, then out again. "Probably just faulty wiring," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Then we heard it. A distinct tap, tap, tap. It was soft, but clear. It sounded like it was coming from outside, from the direction of Mr. Henderson's tap, tap, tap. "Is that on the window?" Liam breathed. We crept to his window, peering out into the darkness. We couldn't see anything. The tapping stopped. We waited, hearts pounding. Tap, tap, tap. This time it was louder, more insistent, and it definitely sounded like it was on the siding of Liam's house, right below his window. We both jumped back. "What is that?" I whispered, terrified. Then, we saw it. A shape, a figure, standing in Mr. Henderson's yard, right by the fence line, facing our window. It was too dark to make out features, just a tall, vaguely human silhouette. My breath hitched. Was it Mr. Henderson? It seemed taller somehow, thinner. The figure slowly raised an arm. It didn't wave, not exactly. It was more like a beckoning gesture, slow and deliberate. Or maybe it was just pointing. My mind couldn't process it. It just felt incredibly menacing. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the figure seemed to melt back into the deeper shadows by Mr. Henderson's house, and was gone. The tapping stopped. We didn't sleep. We told Liam's dad in the morning. He went outside, checked around, even peeked over the fence. Mr. Henderson's yard was quiet, no sign of him. He said it was probably just a tree branch tapping in the wind, or our imaginations running wild after too much sugar. But there was no wind that night, and that figure, that gesture, it wasn't imagination. I never looked at Mr. Henderson's house the same way again. For years, every time I passed it, I'd get a chill. Mr. Henderson passed away a few years later. I heard the people who bought his house had to do a lot of clearing out. I always wondered if they found anything that could explain the tapping, or the strange humming, or the figure by the fence, or if it was just Mr. Henderson, lost in his own lonely world, reaching out in the only unsettling way he knew how. I'll never know, and that, somehow, is the creepiest part. Story 3. My friend Maya lived on a farm. Not a cutesy hobby farm, but a real working farm, miles from the nearest town, surrounded by vast fields of corn and soy. When I was 13, I went for a sleepover. It was late October, and a massive thunderstorm was predicted. I secretly loved storms, so I was kind of excited. That excitement didn't last. Maya's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Cooper, were friendly, but had that no-nonsense farmer vibe. The house itself was old, a sprawling 2-story farmhouse that creaked and groaned even without a storm. As evening fell, the sky turned a sickly green-black, and the wind began to howl like a banshee. Then the rain started, sheets of it, lashing against the windows, and then, boom, the power went out. Mrs. Cooper was prepared, of course. Out came the flashlights and candles, casting long, dancing shadows that made the old house seem even more menacing. We were all in the living room, Maya, her parents, and me. Their old Labrador, Buster, who was usually calm, started pacing and whining softly, his ears perked. "Just the storm, old boy," Mr. Cooper said, scratching his head. But he looked a little uneasy himself. That's when we heard the first noise that wasn't the storm. A distinct thump against the back door, the one leading out to the muddy yard and the dark fields beyond. Buster went rigid, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Probably just a branch blown down," Mrs. Cooper said, but her voice was a little too bright. Mr. Cooper got up. "I'll check." He took a heavy flashlight and went to the kitchen. We heard him unbolt the door, a gust of wind roaring in, then him rebolting it. "Nothing there," he announced, coming back. "Just the wind playing tricks." But Buster didn't settle. He stood at the living room doorway, staring into the dark hallway that led to the back of the house, still growling. A few minutes later, Maya and I both saw it at the same time. A fleeting shadow passed by the living room window, too large and too quick to be a tree branch swaying in the wind. We looked at each other, eyes wide. "Did you see that?" I whispered. She just nodded, her face pale in the candlelight. Then Buster went berserk. He lunged at the front window, barking furiously, his fur bristling. Mr. Cooper grabbed his collar. "What is it, boy? What's out there?" And then, illuminated by a sudden, brilliant flash of lightning, we saw it. A face, pressed against the glass of the front window. Pale, eyes wide and dark, rain plastering hair to its forehead. It was there for a split second, and then the darkness swallowed it again. Mrs. Cooper gasped. Maya screamed. I felt frozen, a cold knot of terror in my stomach. "Stay here!" Mr. Cooper yelled, his voice tight. He disappeared into his bedroom and came back holding his hunting rifle. I don't know if it was loaded, but the sight of it was both terrifying and a tiny bit reassuring. He went to the front door and yelled out, "Whoever's out there, I'm armed. The police have been called. Get off my property." There was no reply but the shrieking wind and lashing rain. We all huddled in the living room, Buster still growling, Mr. Cooper standing guard by the door with the rifle. Then we heard it, a scraping sound, from one of the side windows, like someone was trying to pry it open. Mr. Cooper moved swiftly to that window, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. He banged hard on the glass from the inside. "I see you! Get away from there!" The scraping stopped. The rest of the night was pure agony. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind, sent fresh waves of panic through me. We didn't dare leave the living room. Mr. Cooper stayed by the door, vigilant. Mrs. Cooper tried to keep us calm, but her hands were shaking. Maya and I just clung to each other, listening. The police, when Mr. Cooper finally got through, the phone lines had been spotty. Took almost an hour to arrive, delayed by the storm and the farm's isolation. They searched the property with powerful flashlights. They found deep, muddy footprints leading from the fields to the house, around it, and then back to the fields. But nothing else. No sign of who it was, or how many. The immediate danger passed with the daylight and the storm, but something in me broke that night. The safety of four walls felt like an illusion. Why would anyone be out there, in that storm, trying to get into an isolated farmhouse? Were they just opportunists? Or was it something more targeted, more sinister? We never found out. The Coopers installed a serious security system after that. I never went for another sleepover at Maya's farm. To this day, the sound of wind, howling around an old house, or the sight of a face unexpectedly appearing at a window, even in a movie, sends a shiver of pure, undiluted fear right down my spine. Some questions I've learned are scarier left unanswered.